There exists a book so controversial, so transformative, that it was cast into the shadows of history, buried, suppressed, and deemed too dangerous for the masses. It is a gospel that challenges everything we think we know about early Christianity, revealing hidden truths about Jesus, the divine feminine, and the spiritual power locked away from humanity. This is the Gospel of Mary. But why was it erased from the canon? What secrets does it contain that the Vatican never wanted you to read? Imagine, for a moment, that history is like a grand tapestry, but not all threads are visible. Some have been deliberately cut, removed, and hidden. The Gospel of Mary is one of these missing threads, a lost piece of the puzzle that could change how we perceive spirituality, the role of women in divine wisdom, and even the very nature of Christ's teachings. This ancient text presents a vision of Christianity unlike anything found in the accepted Gospels. It speaks of inner enlightenment, personal connection with the divine, and a radical understanding of salvation, one that does not rely on religious institutions or intermediaries. And that, perhaps, is why it was condemned. In this video, we will uncover the secrets of the Gospel of Mary. We will journey through its hidden messages, explore why it was banned, and reveal what it teaches about the soul, the universe, and the path to enlightenment. Stay with me. What you are about to discover may forever change your understanding of spiritual truth. To understand why the Gospel of Mary was cast into obscurity, we must first step back in time, to an era when Christianity was not a rigid institution, but a diverse and evolving spiritual movement. It is the 2nd century AD. The Roman Empire is vast, and within it, Christianity is still young, still forming. There are no single doctrines, no universally accepted texts. Instead, different groups, Gnostics, mystics, and early Christian sects, interpret the teachings of Jesus in their own way. Some emphasize faith and obedience, while others seek hidden knowledge, direct experience of the divine. The Gospel of Mary emerges from this mystical tradition. Unlike the 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, this text presents a radical perspective, that enlightenment is not about external rituals, but an inner journey. It does not depict Jesus as a distant, all-powerful figure to be worshipped, but as a teacher guiding his followers to awaken their own divine nature. More importantly, it places Mary Magdalene at the center of this spiritual awakening. In the Gospel of Mary, she is not merely a disciple, she is the disciple. She is the one who truly understands Christ's message, the one who receives his deepest teachings. She speaks of the soul's ascent beyond the material world, beyond the powers that seek to trap it in illusion. But this message was dangerous. The early church, growing in power, sought unity through structure, through hierarchy. Spiritual enlightenment, as described in the Gospel of Mary, required no priests, no churches, no institutions. It suggested that salvation was a matter of personal awakening, not blind obedience, and that, for those who sought control, was unacceptable. By the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine embraced Christianity, the Church began formalizing doctrine. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, leaders of the early Church debated which texts would define Christianity, and which would be cast aside. The Gospel of Mary, with its radical ideas and its elevation of the divine feminine, was among those declared heretical. Over time, these suppressed texts vanished from public knowledge. Many were destroyed, others lost to time. It was not until 1896 that a copy of the Gospel of Mary was rediscovered in Egypt, hidden for centuries. Even then, it remained incomplete, torn pages, missing passages, as if someone had tried to erase it from history itself. But why? What does this lost gospel reveal that was considered so dangerous? The answers lie in its hidden teachings, teachings that defy religious authority and open the door to a far deeper understanding of spiritual truth. The Gospel of Mary does something unprecedented. It places Mary Magdalene not just as a follower of Christ, but as his closest and most enlightened disciple. In its fragmented pages, we see a conversation between Jesus and his disciples after his resurrection. But unlike the biblical Gospels, here, it is Mary who steps forward with divine wisdom. She speaks of the soul's journey, describing how it must pass through different realms, each guarded by dark forces that seek to trap it in ignorance and fear. These forces, known as the powers, represent the illusions of the material world, attachments, ego, and the distractions that keep us from realizing our true nature. This is where the Gospel of Mary takes a dramatic departure from traditional Christianity. In most religious teachings, salvation is something external. It comes from following rules, obeying authority, and believing in certain doctrines. But in this gospel, salvation is an inner awakening. Mary describes a path of liberation, where the soul transcends the illusions of the physical world and returns to its divine source. And Jesus does not challenge her. He does not rebuke her, as he sometimes does with the male disciples. Instead, he affirms her understanding, but not everyone accepts her wisdom. In the text, Peter, the very disciple upon whom the church would later be built, reacts with anger and skepticism. Did he really speak privately with a woman and not openly to us? He demands. Are we to turn and listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? This passage is striking. It suggests a division among the disciples, a moment where Mary's knowledge is rejected, not because it is false, but because of who she is, a woman. This moment is key to understanding why the Gospel of Mary was erased. In the early centuries of Christianity, women played a much greater role in spiritual leadership than later history would suggest. There were female prophets, deacons, and even bishops. But as the church became institutionalized, these roles were systematically erased. A gospel that elevated a woman above the apostles, that suggested personal enlightenment over obedience, that dared to challenge Peter himself, it could not be allowed to survive. But the real question is, what exactly was Mary teaching? And why was it so threatening that it had to be buried for nearly 2,000 years? To truly grasp why the Gospel of Mary was considered so dangerous, we must look at its deeper spiritual teachings, ideas that defied the emerging orthodoxy and directly challenged the Church's authority. At its core, the Gospel of Mary presents a radically different understanding of the soul, one that aligns more with mystical traditions than with mainstream Christianity. It teaches that the soul is eternal, divine, and inherently connected to a greater cosmic reality. Unlike traditional doctrine, which emphasizes sin, judgment, and salvation through an external savior, this gospel suggests that the ultimate truth lies within. Mary speaks of a journey beyond the physical world, a path where the soul must overcome fear, desire, and ignorance to ascend into higher realms of existence. She describes these as powers that try to keep the soul bound to illusion, much like the Gnostic concept of archons, spiritual forces that trap humanity in a false reality. One missing section of the text, likely lost or destroyed, seems to contain a detailed explanation of how to break free from these forces. What remains, however, offers a glimpse into a form of spiritual liberation that does not require an intermediary. No priest, no church, no rigid system of rules. The kingdom of heaven, as Mary presents it, is not a place one goes after death. It is a state of consciousness, a level of awareness that can be achieved in this lifetime. And this is precisely where the conflict arises. If salvation is found within, then the church is not needed. If Mary was the closest disciple to Jesus, then the authority of Peter, and by extension, the entire structure of the church, could be questioned. If spiritual enlightenment was accessible to anyone, regardless of status, gender, or religious hierarchy, then control over the masses would be lost. This is not just a theological issue, it is a power struggle. And history tells us exactly how it played out. By the 4th century, the Gnostic texts, including the Gospel of Mary, were declared heretical. The Roman Church, now backed by imperial power, systematically destroyed or suppressed any teachings that threatened its growing influence. Women were pushed out of leadership roles, mysticism was condemned, and the idea of personal enlightenment was replaced with a doctrine of obedience and institutional control. But the truth, as always, finds a way to survive. Fragments of the Gospel of Mary, hidden for centuries, resurfaced in the late 19th century. Other Gnostic texts, like the Nag Hammadi scriptures, emerged in 1945, revealing an entirely different side of early Christianity, one that had been deliberately erased. And now, as we rediscover these lost teachings, we must ask ourselves, what else has been hidden? What knowledge was taken from us? And most importantly, why? But this knowledge is not just for historical curiosity. It has real, profound implications for how we understand spirituality today. Now that we have uncovered the hidden wisdom of the Gospel of Mary, the question becomes, how can we apply these teachings in our own lives? If Mary's message was one of inner enlightenment, personal liberation, and transcending the illusions of the material world, how do we embody this path? The Gospel of Mary challenges the idea that spiritual truth must come from external sources. Instead, it teaches that wisdom is something we remember, not something we acquire. To apply this, we must cultivate a deep relationship with our own intuition. Meditation, contemplation, and mindfulness are powerful tools to connect with this inner knowing. When we silence the noise of the outside world, the distractions, the fears, the societal programming, we begin to hear the voice of truth within us. The key question to ask is, what do I truly know beyond what I've been told? This is the first step toward real spiritual awakening. In the Gospel of Mary, Jesus speaks of the soul passing through different realms, each guarded by forces that try to keep it trapped. These forces, fear, desire, ignorance, are not just abstract ideas. They are psychological and energetic obstacles we all face. One way to break free from them is through awareness. Whenever fear controls an action, the question to ask is whether that fear is real or an illusion. When desire pulls one into attachments, it is important to reflect on whether it brings lasting fulfillment or is merely another temporary distraction. By naming these forces in daily life, their hold begins to weaken. Mary's gospel threatens the Church's authority because it suggests that divine wisdom is available to everyone. This means that no institution, no leader, and no external force can dictate one's spiritual path. However, this does not mean rejecting guidance entirely. It means becoming discerning. Instead of blindly accepting teachings, they must be questioned. Instead of seeking someone to save us, we must take responsibility for our own evolution. A powerful practice for this is daily self-inquiry. What do I believe about my soul? Where did this belief come from? Does this belief empower me or limit me? Over time, this habit rewires the mind, shifting it from a passive receiver of doctrine to an active seeker of truth. One of the most powerful aspects of the Gospel of Mary is its restoration of the feminine voice in spirituality. For centuries, the sacred feminine, intuition, receptivity, deep wisdom, was suppressed in favor of rigid structures and dogma. But now, that balance is returning. To honor this shift, both the masculine and feminine aspects of consciousness must be integrated. Logic and intuition, structure and flow, knowledge and wisdom must be embraced equally. Those conditioned to ignore their emotions must start listening to them. Those taught to suppress their creative energy must let it flow. This is not just about gender. It is about reclaiming a part of spirituality that has been lost for too long. Mary Magdalene's journey was not one of blind faith, but of direct experience. She was not just a follower of Jesus, she embodied his teachings. To walk this path today means moving beyond intellectual understanding into direct, lived experience. Spiritual concepts should not just be read about, they must be practiced. Truth must not just be sought, it must be lived. Whether through meditation, journaling, sacred rituals, or acts of compassion, these lost teachings must find their way into daily life. The hidden gospel is not just a historical relic, it is a roadmap. And those who dare to follow it may just find the wisdom that was never meant to be lost. The Gospel of Mary is more than just a suppressed text. It is a doorway into a radically different vision of spirituality. One where divine wisdom is not locked away in institutions, but accessible to every soul willing to seek it. One where the journey of enlightenment is not about blind obedience, but about deep, personal transformation. This is why the Vatican never wanted you to read it. Because if you did, You might begin to question everything you've been told about faith, sin, salvation, and the nature of your own existence. For centuries, power structures have thrived on the idea that humans need intermediaries between themselves and the divine. That spirituality is something to be granted, rather than something inherent. But the Gospel of Mary threatens that very foundation. It reminds us that enlightenment is not something to be given, it is something to be remembered. That salvation is not an external reward, it is an internal awakening. Perhaps this is why Mary was cast aside, her gospel buried, her name tainted. Not because she was unimportant, but because she was too powerful. And perhaps, in rediscovering her story, we do not just reclaim a lost piece of history, we reclaim something far greater. We reclaim the knowledge that was hidden, the wisdom that was suppressed, and the path that was meant to be walked by all who dare to seek the truth for themselves. The question now is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it fade, as so many hidden truths have before? Or will you take the next step, question deeper, and begin to walk the path of self-discovery that was meant to be yours all along? The answer, as Mary herself might remind us, was never outside of you. It was within you all along.